Despite some African countries pulling out of World Economic Summit in South Africa and strong warnings across the continent, fresh xenophobic attacks occurred in Johannesburg City on Sunday. Will there ever be a lasting solution? Politicians are being blamed not just for security challenges, but for the religious crisis in Nigeria. This is Plus Politics, and I am Maryann Okon. At least 2 people have died and dozens arrested following fresh xenophobic attacks in South Africa's Johannesburg City on Sunday. The city's police chief, David Tembe, had confirmed that 2 people have died from gunshot wounds and stabbing, adding that cars, buildings and businesses had been vandalized. Now, joining me in the studio to have this conversation, I'm being joined by Oladotun Hassan. He's a political analyst. He's also a lawyer. He's the chairman of the NBA Lekki Forum. It's good to have you join us.
Pleasure.
And I also have Malaki Ugummadu. He is a lawyer. He's of the Committee for Defense of Human Rights. It's good to have you join us. All right. So I'm going to start with you, of course, Malaki. This situation, we thought it must have died down, you know, with all of the darts coming at South Africa from left, right, center, because Nigeria is not the only country that is being caught in this whole xenophobic or Afrophobic attack. But it seems like it's a never-ending, you know, spree. Where do we go from here?
Well, where we'll go will be dependent on a couple of factors that will conspire to give a direction. However, I do believe that not much has happened on the approaches adopted so far, fundamental enough to redirect the trend. If you take a look at the 2 leading African countries concerned, you will see that, in my view, there is serious disconnect from the leadership and the citizens. Otherwise, there won't be this case of xenophobic attack, considering the very profound role of Nigeria and its citizens towards the liberation of South Africa in 1994.
But we keep making reference to these things, yes, and no disrespect to history. But if the people that you're making reference to these things for are ignorant and could not even be bothered about it, what's the essence of pointing in that direction?
And that's why I said there's this disconnect. Usually, there is supposed to be sufficient information out there by the leadership of the same ANC, which is a political movement that has attained a centenary age, that was founded on the principle of Pan-Africanism, the African Brotherhood, and one that defined the existence of a movement that is anchored on a collective strength, a strength that reflects the possibility and potentials of Africa as a continent. And therefore, if we still have in the leadership of the political environment elements and cadres of the same ANC, unable to impact, as it were, these very profound philosophical base of ANC, then I was right when I said there was this disconnect. Because come to think of it, we're talking of an era where students were taking out pocket money from, you know, and making voluntary contribution. Nigeria rose to world powers, Great Britain in particular. Scholarship were awarded, shelter were provided. I have argued elsewhere that Thabo Mbeki, the past president of South Africa, took shelter here, was housed here, you know, in known places for as long as those struggles continued. So if we could not handle, or if we cannot, as it has turned out to be, issues of xenophobia, then where would be the moral ground to challenge Trump and the American world over racism?
Interesting. I'll put a pin there. I'm coming to you now. Dotun. The South African government has, or some South African leaders have cautioned against making inflammatory statements in the wake of these xenophobic attacks. The International Relations Minister, Lady Pandor, met with heads of diplomatic missions in South Africa on Monday to allay their fears of further escalation of xenophobia. But it is still happening as we speak. A friend of mine in South Africa, who's South African, took a screen grab of the SABC News showing me the spate of attacks in South Africa. But back here in Nigeria, the government is saying, oh, nothing really happened, it's not as bad as you make it seem. Are we doing the right thing? And I'm not in any way saying that we should, put fuel into the fire, but can we not tell the truth so that we can help deal with these issues outside the shores of the country?
Well, it's quite unfortunate to always see how the situation of this magnitude is being downplayed in a manner of economizing the truth, and there is no way we can be too lackadaisical about an issue of international importance, because this issue of xenophobic attack is not just of Nigeria. It's not just all about the Africans alone. It's now taking another dimension that all foreigners should leave their country. So this kind of statement it's high time the international community, where the AU, the UN, needs to take some deliberate and emergency approach in dealing with this situation, because this situation we might think is arising from xenophobic attack. It could lead to international war. It could lead to other crises, because we're already taking daily developmental approach. And if our government, on our home part, we have not done anything meaningful to bring on the table that, oh, this approach beyond evacuation, beyond non-attendance of the World Economic Forum, those are just a flash in the pan. It has no base in relation to our role and status as one of the biggest African nations. So where we ought to stand as a date is, one, there must be a deliberate intergovernmental diplomacy relation in dealing with the issue, and annexing with all other affected nations. Now taking it more, because no nation can step their army on South African soil to defend their citizens, and there is no time we can be segmenting, trying to filter who is a Nigerian, who is a Ghanaian, who is a Tunisian. Everybody is being taken on. So it is imminent on UN or AU as a means of rescuing the situation. Evacuation will not resolve our case, because we have investors, we have people that are living, we have married people, we have people that have taken South Africa as their home. So there should be a more deliberate plan at the level of the AU in ensuring that a handful of peacekeeping force is sent down there to protect, because it seems the South African law enforcement agents from the police are not doing the needful enough to quell and arrest the situation. Moreover, it's been interpreted as they are same of the same. They are more or less enabling or enablers of these atrocities. So there's a need for a proper re-engineering of our focus. As a nation, we need to really put up some other measures. Economically, there's a way we can put South Africa on their toes. Oh, let us begin to look at it. Oh, how are we going to stop this? How much is South Africa making in a day? Okay. And they are repatriating all their money from Nigeria. Not that they are having a recurrent review of reinvestment of their money there. So Nigerians can come, at least our president always come up with executive bill. This is a time that the executive bill is most important to salvage a situation. So let an executive bill that will stampede the situation and arrest the situation whereby The government will not see it as, let us allow our citizens to raise the flame. They will now be calling the fire extinguisher to come in. So
back to you, Malaki. Several governments of different countries, I think Tanzania has, and Gambia, I think, if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong, I beg your pardon, have grounded flights going to South Africa and coming from South Africa. There have been friendlies that have been cancelled by many countries. Nigeria has only issued a travel advisory. We've not necessarily taken any serious, stern steps. Some people would say even Zimbabwe, which I would use the word loosely here, is a basket case in terms of its economy, has taken bold steps in addressing the issue of xenophobic attacks against their nationals. But Nigeria has not necessarily done such. And there are pundits who have also made the case that, you know, Nigeria is responsible for bringing every other country together, and so we should not be seen putting a bad foot forward. Yes. So do you agree that the diplomatic way that we're going about it is the way that would get the kind of results that we want from the South African government?
That's a bit dodgy and sensitive at the same time, in the sense that it's a precarious situation, one that doesn't lend itself easily to a straitjacket solution path. And what do I mean by that? If you continued on the path of diplomacy and fail to act precisely at the point when you needed to act, the tendency is that you compromise more lives, which is what is being hacked down now. Future are being destroyed, the prospects are terminated, opportunities are wasted, and so on and so forth. So where do you strike the balance? This whole business of diplomacy is a very dodgy one. I have always known, and I've argued elsewhere, that in the world of diplomacy, there is no yes. There is perhaps. There is no no. There is maybe. So if you're going to be faced with a life and death situation, one in which the nationals of your country are hacked down, you know, avoidably, in circumstances that would have otherwise been handled differently, you would see that there must be a limit to diplomacy. Otherwise, you energize those running roughshod on your nationals. And I imagine that that is the core of your question, namely, to what extent can we continue to diplomatically handle this matter without dealing with it frontally?
And at the expense of more of our people dying.
Correct. So the big question really is that, yes, that last point you made is very, very crucial. It is that, look, Nigeria in the African continent cannot easily throw its weight. Otherwise, it will also be prepared to harvest the repercussions of that. However, if you continued with diplomacy and refuse to show the consequences that must come as a result of your diplomatic moves, then you're likely going to face the same challenge anyway. And I give you an example. This whole thing didn't start last week. We've had xenophobic activities and attacks from 2008. Mark you, South Africa gained independence, so to speak, or liberated themselves from apartheid rule in 1994. By 1995, there were flashes of this intolerance. Again, I keep reminding people that generations after generations of South Africans are people conceived in the womb of violence, so to speak. And even their songs are war songs. Their downsteps are war, and they wear war gears to show that they are not just militant. They are listening to their parliamentary debates, from Malema to all of them. It is this very combative. Again,
it's a very interesting. It's a very interesting flaw.
I do enjoy it,
it's
but
like,
not as much as I do.
Parliament.
Not as much as I do the British Parliament, as we just watched, a few moments ago.
Yes.
But the point is this: It is that Nigeria must find a way of clearly establishing the fact that there are consequences of continuing disobeying our very modest demands. What are those demands? Put an end to the killings, instant killings of Nigeria. We must put an end to that. If it requires that we reach out to AU, as he has talked about, to even ECOWAS here. Of course, I was with Dr. Agnes, the special rapporteur of the United Nations on human rights, just 2 weeks ago. And we had cause to raise human rights issues across Africa, not knowing that we're going to deal with this xenophobic attack. So it is time to reach out to these specialized agencies or bodies that has a supervisory, if you like, a supervisory role in world politics, and then be able to, impress it on South Africa that they must go beyond what is happening at the moment. Do not forget...
Is it something, we keep saying we have to impress it on them. Yes, it's the job of their government. But is it something that is attainable anytime soon? Because we're dealing with people, dead bodies dropping.
That's a very
we're dealing with businesses being set on fire.
Question.
How achievable and what is the closest possible time
now, if Nigeria
work?
makes a very strong case to the United Nations immediately, and speaks to the urgency of now, including the incessant killings of Nigerians, even Africans or African people in South Africa. Something like a response by statement will not take months. There are sections and organs of these institutions that are saddled with response. Don't forget they have refugee bodies too. They don't wait until every person is drowned or before they hold their special sessions no. These bodies get activated on the spur of the moment with the occurrence of such anticipated situation. Mm-hmm. So if we're able to do that, at least it shows South Africa that this is no longer an African discussion or my brother, big brother relationship. It has now attracted the international community, but more importantly, that there are consequences for continuing to flout that. And these things can be done. But within the political environments that we find ourselves, South Africa, Nigeria, look, the ANC as a political movement has a responsibility to reorientate their people. There is no way a serving deputy police chief could come out with the kind of statement we heard.
But and I'm not in any way defending. I'm not in any way defending that minister or the police boss. But to be fair, that message was a message in 2017.
No,
according to the BBC.
Oh.
They did some fact finding. That video of the man saying that foreigners are taking over.
Now that's
it's in 2017.
Well.
It doesn't take away from the message.
Again, the context could have also been different.
Yes.
But now that it has been played up so frequently, in short, the statement of Cyril Ramaphosa was also played up. Then he wasn't
during his campaign.
Yes, then he wasn't the president, and it wasn't too distant or different from what this police chief said. Now, if you put that together, and then listen to what the resentment shown by the South African state, you will see a tacit endorsement, because there is none. So I'm making the point that supposing they take advantage of this situation, because as it were, the indigenous South Africans seem to believe that they are doing the right thing. The historical disconnection I talk about may be too wide that people don't even relate with the story you are talking about. The philosophical meaning of the political party that so pretends the affairs of South Africa today may have been lost in a way that people just throw caution to the wind and begin to treat fellow Africans as though we're strangers. So I therefore would recommend that, look, we must have equivalence of NOA over there. I'm talking of National Orientation Agency, whatever it is called over there. This is the time for them to pull up the sleeves, rise to the occasion, this massive reorientation, because South Africa indeed stands to benefit with even the influx of Nigerians into South Africa.
That's very true. Let me come to you, Doctor. The question I asked him, he didn't really answer it, so I'm going to bring it to you. How soon can this reorientation happen? And we're not, as Nigerians, asking or trying to tell South Africa how to lead their people, but what the leadership that they have has somewhat, or whether they have failed to lead or they have not led the way they should have, it has somewhat affected us and affected our indigents. So we're asking, how soon can this orientation or reorientation or education or enlightenment going to work, so that, because there are South African, there are Nigerians who are there that may not want to come back to Nigeria.
Right.
How do we ensure that our people are safe there if these people decide that, okay, today we're going to start teaching history? How long do we have to wait? And how many more people have to die in the process?
Well, to me, I say this, there is a need for the application of the principle of necessity here, because it's an emergency situation. These are no time for us to read the books or read the chronicle and let them know that, well, take point A to point B. We cannot go the horde or catalog of the situation. But what we actually need at the moment is an aggressive master plan and intelligence of how to deal with the situation. This is a situation that even among the South Africans that are fighting, that are on this xenophobic trend, that are moving up this thing, there are still South Africans that are against them, not the whole of the South Africa.
Of course.
It's not that the whole world should cast aspersion on South Africa.
Yes.
But out of these people that are displaying criminality, now it is a frontal, in Nigeria, people that were arrested are now being taken to court for property. How much of the South African government? It's like there is a loss of government. There is a loss. The nation is now reduced to a state of anarchy. Whatever garnishing statement that is coming from their government has not dealt with the situation. Where the people who want to start saying is, oh, the situation, the South African government have maybe brought out their army to quell the situation in support of the. There is a moving helicopters in the nation. There are a lot of other. Then the safety of every world citizens that are domiciled in South Africa. So these are no time for Nigerian government to be putting up airplane to lifting. We are not. It's more. We are not in a war, not yet really a war zone situation.
The people are dying, lives are at stake.
But government, that is where we have to now look at the aggressive master plan from the AU and the UN. That an emergency situation, not from the Nigerian government alone, but all other affected African nations, the way they are going about by shutting down their air flight is not going to really support and positively affect the situation.
But that is somewhat of a nerve center for countries. I mean, the airlines raking a lot of money. It's some form of a business. If you shut it down, you're going to obviously bleed the country of some revenue. Those
are areas that the government of those nations, there are misplaced of priorities here. Our own government is having a misplace of its own decision. The decision of all pulling out of World Forum and all this is more or less like you are not yet dealing with the lives that have been affected. All we need now is let there be a grandstanding against the government of South Africa to act. And if the government is failing to act, an emergency situation that will stem the atrocity whereby those that are perpetrating this evil will be swooped against, will be picked, will be arrested, and we will begin to see their prosecution. So if we just feel and begin to, because the essence, because there is no deterrent, nobody is feeling that the government is acting. So it has given rise to most South Africans to support. So it's not becoming a trend. It's not becoming a culture of violence. So it's most dangerous at the level we are now, if nothing meaningful, because if nothing meaningful is done, we and every global community will begin to see, and every South African with more hatred in their mind in dealing with their citizens. So at the moment, what we need now is to a situation that will, aside diplomacy, aside us talking on the table, there's a need for an action. There's a need for military rule. There's a need for equality. There's a need for deterrent. These people killing, at a point of self-defense, there should be something that will arrest, the amount of violence or the gun. Okay, now the government have repelled, arrested, and I won't want us to be too mean, soft on this, because these guys that are running this, is more or less that they're having some sponsors in their government. So that is where we want to now go step in addressing the issue of the ANC as a party. That ANC is an ideological party that is predicated on freedom, justice. So if this ideology is fast eroding in their memories, the Mandelas and all these world leaders that we are looking up to, their own principle is no longer inherently holding waters in their nation. So there is a need for a national and massive orientation.
This is an ongoing conversation. I'm thinking it might not end anytime soon, but I want to thank you, Dr. Hassan. He's a political analyst, chairman of the NBA Lekki Forum. Malaki Ugummadu is a lawyer. He's of the Committee for Defense of Human Rights. Thank you, gentlemen. This does not necessarily have an end. We may have to come back and keep talking about this, and hopefully those in authority will take a lift from this. We'll be right back after the break, and we'll be talking about the Sultan of Sokoto's statement about the fact that politicians, somewhat the ones that are fueling religious crisis. We'll be right back.